Hello, I'm Gordon Brown, and this is greeneconomy.tv. Welcome to the Circular Economy Show with resident expert Chris Whyte, Director of the African Circular Economy Network, and special guest Gordon Ayres from AGAMA Biogas. Today, we're speaking about organic waste, the third of a three-part series, with a focus today on technologies and industries that can be and are being set up to handle and beneficiate this particular waste stream. Without further ado, Chris, welcome as always. Please can I ask you to give us a bit more context and just get the conversation going with our guest, Gordon. Thank you very much indeed.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. And hi to everyone again. So this is the third episode of the second series, and we were looking at organics in the first three episodes. So we've gone from a local look to a regional or national look, and now we're looking at a global system. So let me put this into perspective for you. When we talked about the local, we looked at just the Western Cape area. And the Western Cape area, I think we had 2.8 million tons of organic waste that are filling up landfills that we need to resolve. When we took it to the South African level, nationally, we're talking about 44 million tons of organic waste. And that, again, all the issues that come with that. When we take this to the next level, globally is one thing, but if we look at Africa, Africa is a particular problem. So in Africa, we've gone from 2.8 at the local to 44 million tons at the national. In Africa, we're looking at about 1.3 billion tons. Now, that is just based on the post-harvest losses. So in reality, if we then look at the other organic waste streams, we're probably close to 2 to 2.4 billion tons. That is a huge amount of organic waste. So now in Africa, that's about 30 to 40% of the food that is produced never reaches the market. And again, circular economy plays a role in that. So a lot of these problems are related to things like the lack of logistics capacity, the lack of infrastructure to be able to move crops around. That gap really is between production and retail. So we lose a huge amount of that waste. And there's other issues that come into that. So there's a lack of agri-processing facilities because we don't have the energy in some of these areas to look at issues like food processing, cold storage, and that just increases the issue. The impact of this from some of the work done by World Bank is that if we just looked at the post-production harvest losses in Africa, we would be able to feed another 1.6 billion people in the continent. Those numbers are huge. So these are critical issues that we need to look at with regards to understanding the complexity and the scale of organic waste as an issue. We're in a continent where we have a lack of energy, 650 million people without access to electricity. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the logistical capacity. That has been exacerbated through COVID with the issue around global supply chains. And yet we are sitting here with millions of people, billions of people who don't have a meal on a daily basis. And that's really where we need to look at these opportunities. So to unpack that on the regional sort of scale, we're going to have a chat to Gordon from AGAMA. And so welcome, Gordon. What we want to try and do is that just before you introduce yourself, Gordon is with AGAMA. They look at biogas applications across the continent. And we want to try and bring some of these issues into scope to understand not the problem, but the opportunity and the application for actually making a significant change. Gordon, welcome to the show. Fantastic to have you here.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for the invite.
Absolute pleasure. So maybe just a short, brief introduction to yourself and where you're from, Gordon.
Sure. I'm the managing director of AGAMA Biogas. We are the biggest small-scale biogas digester supplier in South Africa. We design and build a small-scale biogas digester in Cape Town. We help and assist with all types of biogas projects all over Africa, all over the continent. We do a lot of technical backgrounds and a lot of technical scoping to see which projects will work, which projects don't work, and so on. So we've got a great reputation. We've been working very hard in this space. So it's a really nice chance to get to talk to people and let people know what we're doing and what's going on.
Fantastic. Gordon, I mean, you've been around for a while. I think you've been around for as long as I have. Somehow you still have more hair than I do. But the opportunity in terms of implementation is enormous. I mean, literally, you turn your head and you can find an application for looking at biogas, whether it is at the community level, at the individual household level, at a sort of a distribution center level, at a landfill level, at a regional level. These things can be implemented virtually anywhere. And yet the opportunity in terms of that is not just understanding the energy behind it, but also understanding the byproducts. So the byproducts, particularly in terms of looking at the organic matter, bringing nutrients back into the cycle, and looking at high quality organic composts that can come from that, and again, feeding into the food security systems. But why is it that we're seeing such a hesitation in terms of the implementation and development of biogas? What is it that people don't get? Where are the obstacles to really expanding the great work that you're doing?
Wow. Okay. So that's a lovely question. So as you said, on so many different levels. So at the top levels, there is a lack of comfort around the technology, a lack of understanding. We got people that have been through university who are now our representative engineers in all different applications, and they were trained very, very strongly on utilizing electricity. That was the way of the future. This is what we did. And so they are now in senior positions in some of those big companies and some of the big organizations. And they're having real problems adapting to this new reality where electricity is just not what it was. It's just not the kind of clean availability that it used to be. So we're getting a certain amount of hesitation in that space where we're just not getting that buy-in as yet. Now that we're getting more and more German companies coming through, able to show the technology working, they've got a very established and mature market there. We're getting more and more response from the bigger companies, and the mines particularly are working very strongly towards no waste landfill 2030, and we're starting to see some movement there. So unfortunately, a lot of what you don't see is what's actually happening in the background. And here in South Africa, particularly in the biogas space, we tend to play our cards very, very close to our chests, and we don't talk about projects. There are some very interesting projects. There's the Bio2Watt project, for instance, in Bronkhorstspruit, which has quite successfully been passing 1 megawatt of electricity up the lines to the BMW plant at Roslyn for some 4 or 5 years now. And everybody just kind of dodges it. Nobody actually knows that it exists. So then in the middle scale, your little farmers and so on, the farmers are very interested in biogas. We have seen very strong response, especially from emerging market farmers and middle of the range. The problem there is access to finance. I don't know if you know, but the farmers in South Africa are amongst the most indebted part of the population. They are really under massive stress and massive problems trying to bring the food to our tables. So the access to banking and so on for them, especially to finance middle-sized projects, which can be anywhere between 3.5 to about 12 million in terms of investment, is very difficult because the banks, to a large extent, don't understand the technology. So there's no level of comfort. So in order to give themselves some kind of margin of security, they push the interest rates. And then once you start playing around with the interest rates, then the actual cost of the project starts to climb, and it comes very quickly to a point where you are not working on a 3-year return on investment, but suddenly you're now staring down the barrel of 5 to 7 years returns on investments, which are very difficult for people to secure. And then on very small scale, which is the boxing place that we really, really enjoy, is there's also a problem of the cost of systems, and then trying to get enough of a foothold. So trying to group people together, trying to get finance in place for small groups to work on a project. So for instance, if I can get together 200 small farmers, give them a small loan and get them through the gate, then that would be a massive change in terms of South Africa. But again, your big banks and big organizations don't want to do 200 microloans. It just is not, it's not their model. So we're kind of fighting the established norm, if you like. And also there's a strange belief that things will go back to normal. There's it's a crazy kind of point of view that people keep on harking back and hoping that things will steady out, the country will balance itself, electricity will start to work again. It's like a war, kind of a war footing. You don't want to believe that this is reality. And we have seen it before, time and time again. People are very, very quick to adapt. We will adapt to almost anything. We adapted to the cell phone. We adapted to no water in Cape Town. But the ability to change, to make a serious decision, to say, okay, this is the new future. This is what we got to do, and this is what we got to change. That is a very slow step indeed. So what you're seeing, Chris, even though it looks like there's almost no movement on the ground, is there's small pockets of intrusion where we managed to get the technology slowly getting gain hold, and we're starting to get some really good success stories to start getting out there. And I'm trying to get to a point of infection. And for people that have lived through COVID, will know that the infection point is great, because you don't go from 1 to 2, you go from 1 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16. And I think within probably the next 15 or so, 10 to 15 years, we're going to see as big a biogas pickup in this country as we did on solar systems, for instance.
So just a quick point from my side, and I hope that that's certainly true, and that's very exciting indeed, and great to hear about some of these projects. I just want to make a quick point to the viewers out there. If you have any questions while you're watching, please post those questions on your social media platform. We'll pick them up, and we'll make every effort to get those answered for you. So just a quick question on my side, Gordon. I wasn't 100% clear on your point about electricity and how that tied into the conversation. Perhaps you could just clarify that for me, please.
Sure. So on your big, sorry, I'm not sure which point.
Right at the beginning, you were talking about the fact that young engineers have gone through and they've been educated through the universities, but that electricity in relation, obviously, to biogas was a bit of a challenge of some kind.
Yeah, so Gordon, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So essentially, what happened is that when engineers were trained, and I'm talking about several years ago, you're talking about people now in top management in these companies, they were trained on the energy source was electricity. So if you were talking in terms of a smelting plant, you were talking in terms of a doing concrete, for instance, using a massive kiln, then electricity was your answer, and that's how they were trained. So suddenly now they're in management positions, and the world has changed. So we have to now look at other and alternative energy sources, and they keep on trying to replace like with like. But to a large extent, a kiln, for instance, uses thermal energy. To get it from electricity is a bit of a madness, because what you're trying to do is you create thermal energy, you turn that into steam energy, you then turn it into electricity, you send it down the line, you then convert it back from steam, from this electricity, back to a thermal energy. The losses there are in the region of about between 45 and 50% of all the energy you generated is gone. So we have to get people, and especially this kind of top management, into a different mindset where they start to realize what they're actually after is not electricity. What they're actually after is a thermal answer, a thermal power. Does that answer your question, Gordon?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Absolutely. And I think this is often what people misunderstand is that we've got this mindset and we're just used to having things the way that it's been for so long, but it's inefficient. It's part of the linear economy. It doesn't make sense. We need to change these systems. And the opportunity in terms of looking at getting off the main transmission grids and looking at microgrid type applications is enormous. But you touched also on something which we discussed, with issues like COVID and the supply chain and the impact on the economy. Hits very hard on the fact that there's so many people without an income, and yet we have lost the ability to be self-sustaining. We have lost the ability, we've lost touch with the soil, we've lost touch with our ability to grow our own vegetables. And yet, if you look at the township economy status, we've lost that completely. We've replaced it with food security now is getting a government grant at the end of the month. And then going to a big retail store to buy your groceries. It just doesn't make sense. And yet, we're looking at the economic issues, understatement of the year, with regards to the country and the opportunity in terms of being able to constantly subsidize and support this massive level of the population without jobs, money, access to food is going to be a critical issue. And I think we've seen that recently with the riots that were in KZN and to some extent in Johannesburg, where it's just this absolute frustration. We're going to see that again if we don't change. And the opportunity is to understand that requirement with regards to food security. I think that's a critical issue. But on top of that, maybe we could also touch on the opportunity of climate change. And we're all out there at the moment. We've got a whole bunch of people in Glasgow at COP26. We have a very vibrant government organization that goes out there and signs every agreement that they want to. So we've signed the Paris Climate Agreement with signatories to the UNFCCC in terms of reducing our carbon, and yet we come home and want to build another coal-fired power plant. So, there's a bit of communication gap there as well somewhere. But we've also got to look at that opportunity. So organics going into our landfills or decomposing the environment convert to methane. And methane has 23, depending on who you speak to, 23 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. And we have to look at our carbon mitigation. So perhaps also, hopefully out of COP26, we may see some stabilization of the carbon market and the opportunity to look at a co-financing application through carbon offsets. Do you think that might be an opportunity? So maybe talk a little bit about the food security option from looking at biogas, as well as the potential carbon opportunities. Is that on your radar?
Yes, very much so. I don't know if you know, a couple of years ago, there were carbon credits generated for these wonder bags. Now, wonder bag is nothing more than a fabric bag with a filler, normally a recycled polycarbonate. And fantastic, where they put together a deal that looked like that. So it was supporting women who were without jobs. They were able to sew these wonder bags and make some money because it was already had a little bit of carbon credit in it. So our point of view being, let's just take a very small project of ours, the schools project. So in South Africa, we've got 23,000 schools on the National School Feeding Scheme. That's a scheme that puts one meal into every kid a day that they go to school. And if you're not sitting down, I think this number might make you sit down. We're feeding 9.2 million children a day through that project. Now, if that number doesn't scare you, then it's another thing. So, yes, the ability of this kind of biogas to pick up on these carbon credits. So you were talking about food waste landfill. So as we know, the food waste makes up roughly about 30% of what ends up in landfill anyway. So if you just take one little biogas digester, and I'm talking about one of our little small BP6 units, and you put 100 kilograms of food into that unit per day, over a year, you've loaded 36.5 tons of organic waste, landfill, direct to landfill waste that will no longer go to landfill. Now, if I multiply that out by the schools project at 22,500, I come to get some very, very interesting numbers, which could really interest people in terms of these carbon credits. Mm-hmm. And then if we feed that back, which is our intention, is to feed it back into the cost of the biogas digester itself, so that I'll be able to bring the cost of the biogas digester down in order to then get more of them out. And round we go, the circular economy of using those carbon credits to reduce carbon.
Quite right.
Yes. Chris, if I can just jump in there. I mean, this is fascinating statistics, and what an incredible project. Gordon, I'd like to learn more about that, and we can write about that in our journal and so forth. So I'll follow up with you off air on that. But just to get a sense of the practical reality. So firstly, I was curious to understand, what are the exact outputs of the typical biodigester that you manufacture and sell, and in this particular project, these school projects particularly, and how does the biogas project link to feeding the kids specifically?
Okay, very nice, thanks. So in output, there's always two outputs with the biogas digester. The first one is your gas, obviously. So from calculations, we had a test school that we did with much thanks to WESA and Oxfam. They helped us with the school at Kangazile in Johannesburg, Springs, Johannesburg, quite a low-income area. And over a year, we were able to save that school some 60,000 Rand in LPG that they didn't have to purchase. So those are quite interesting numbers. And then the other little interesting number was the school food garden. Now, biogas digestion, because of the way that it eats the organic waste out, those little bacteria are fantastic because they leave the nutrients, the minerals within the water that's left. So it becomes a fantastic organic fertilizer. And if you see where some of these schools are in some of the townships, I mean, some of those areas were particularly picked because the soil quality was too low for farming. We've got to be aware of our history, unfortunately. And suddenly now you take this very, very poor soil, you put this fantastic organic fertilizer into it, and it's not just an organic fertilizer, it's a genuine soil rebuilder. It is a probiotic. It helps the fauna and the flora within the soil itself. We start to get earthworms back. We start to get bees back. We start to get all these natural things coming back. So even very damaged soils, like ex-mining soil and so on, can easily be used in this kind of methodology. So suddenly now we had a school food garden. We had a 40 square meter school food garden with some great help from our friends at AT&D. And we started to grow food. We grew between 6 to 9 tons of replacement food for that school. And of course, it's all organic. The leaf form, extremely strong, very good root form, very little insect infestation. There was no need for insecticides. There was no need for other fertilizers. The water from the process itself was part of the feeding water. So I didn't need nearly as much water. And suddenly now we are feeding these school kids this fantastic organic food as a co-feeder to the National School Feeding Scheme daily menu. And we saw three things that happened immediately that were just unbelievable. The first one was that the teachers reported in the afternoon they were getting much higher attentions. The second was that we were ending up with less absenteeism. The kids weren't getting as sick as much. And thirdly, overall, the entire school, the marks went up. So, I mean, those are, if I could point that to anybody and say to them, guys, this is the result from a very, very cost-effective intervention. That's why it's so exciting for us.
Absolutely, and I think this is what I love about the circular economy. It's unpacking the impacts, and that's what we really need to try and understand. And what we're seeing certain directives that are coming through that are pushing us in that direction. I see Christo, one of our regular viewers, he's posted a question in terms of the current bans, particularly in the Western Cape that we're looking at in terms of organic waste to landfill. Is this going to open up opportunities for the likes of AGAMA and similar technologies? And, how do we look at working together to unpack those opportunities? I mean, you mentioned some of them, which from a tangible perspective, when you're looking at the economics of a model, we don't look at things like absentee levels. We don't look at the impact in terms of the mental health from physical health that comes from that. The opportunity, the byproducts for the water, which is a liquid fertilizer, the solids, which are a carbon back into the soil, the increase in soil biodiversity. It's been talked about at length at COP26. Let's go back to farming the soil before you farm the product. Mm-hmm. So maybe just answer Christo's question. Do you see that as an opportunity? Is there a direction? Are we starting to see the floodgates opening?
Yes, definitely. I would say that it releases funding, which wasn't there for us before. The municipalities are amongst the most conservative when it comes to new technologies out of anybody. A municipal manager does not want to take any risks. Yep. But suddenly now they're being pushed out of their comfort zone. They really are going to have to take us seriously and start to look at the technology seriously. And then best of all, out of that, of course, there's income. There's a real potential there's an understanding that there's going to be a cost involved. And yes, I believe that it's really opening up the floodgates for us.
Gordon, just a quick question, an extension of Christo van Schalkwyk's question. To what extent is there a reaction inside the municipalities to this new policy around banning organic waste to landfill? Is there commensurate development of policy or relaxation of policy or enabling environment that's also being established in order for these sorts of technologies to take off?
That's an interesting question. In some municipalities, definitely. The guys down at Green Cape are doing fantastic work. They're helping, they're moving. The guys from SABIA, who's the South African Biogas Industry Association, doing phenomenal work to really clean the road off. Great help there from GIZ, great help from USAID to try and open up these pathways. In some municipalities, they are sitting like rabbits with eyes in the headlights, and they are not able to move. They just don't have the capacity. They didn't have the capacity to even run decent landfills in the first place. So there is going to be a bit of a disaster area as far as that unpacking is concerned. But again, you've got to take your benchmarks. You've got to really work with the guys who are doing well, fix those into place, and then spread out to the guys who are really struggling. But there are phenomenal tools. USA developed the CLEAR tool to help municipalities with their reporting and their understanding of where their waste and stuff came from. So we're getting a lot of help. And also COP26, the pledge of the assistance to help, I think might also start unlocking some money. So yeah, I'm eager. I'm very glad I'm in this industry right at the moment.
I think that there's a little bit of a slip there, which I actually found quite hilarious, because it's not COP26, it's COP26. Maybe it should be COPE. But absolutely, and I think this is where coming on from what Christo was saying as well is to understand we should be driving this actively, and this is where we're trying to get to engage with people at policy and the likes of Green Cape, etc., doing fantastic work to be able to actually make it compulsory. So that we should be banning landfill or banning. We should be banning landfill completely. But organics is a great place to start. But then we need to put the systems into place from a procurement to supply chain perspective, from a support perspective, that will allow us to look at the rapid deployment of these things. So we should be saying every school should have one. Obviously, the very, very small community type schools, it's going to be a bit difficult. But if you've got more than 50 kids or whatever, there should be a system in place. And it can also be utilized to look at the wastewater as well. So that can be added to the system. And again, it's getting people's mindsets to understand that it's all organics at the end of the day. I mean, it goes in one end, comes out the other end, and that's basically what a biodigester does as well. But to try and pull this together, I think we need to look at specific policy that drives it, where we should be actively engaging on this to unpack those opportunities, where we look at preserving our water resources, looking at offsetting our energy requirements, putting nutrients into these kids that makes their brains work so we get a better response at school and less absenteeism, that we start to see all of these things developing as part of the circular economy, where mankind, or what some of our experts in ACEN call the humanosphere, is the central component and the driver behind making the circular economy work. And that's what it's about, getting those decision makers to get off their swivel chairs and actually make things happen.
Gordon, just a quick, perhaps more practical entrepreneurial question maybe, is just to talk about the economics. You touched on it earlier on, but this is also something where the municipalities can really play a massive role, is what are the issues around feedstock and security of feedstock, and what role does that play in potential funding decisions from third parties? Perhaps just talk us all through potentially, if you was pitching a customer, what sort of paybacks, what sort of returns on investment, what are the best feedstocks? Just give us a bite out of your pitch that speaks specifically to economics.
Okay, so there's good news about biogas as far as the economics is concerned. Generally, and I'm talking about our kind of level projects, we work on a 3-year return on investment. We can return that quickly. The economics really work out exceptionally well. We work on the gas saving, we work on a thermal, we work on the chances of the fertilizer, and then in some of the cases we talk to customers in terms of their cost of sending waste to landfill, which is in the region of about 600 Rand per ton for some of our more corporate customers. So economically, if I can get in front of the accountant of a company, I have maybe about 15 or 20 minutes, and that's it. It's sold to that person. So that part of it stands by itself, which is very, very exciting.
What a pleasure. And we're beginning to run out of time. As we discussed off air, half an hour goes extremely quickly. We've added a bit of time, and we're still going to play out with the AGAMA video that we're looking forward to. I just want to emphasize to viewers, stick around, watch the video. It's super informative, so do stay around for that. Perhaps, Chris, from your side, if you could maybe pose a last question or make a concluding remark. We'll leave it to Gordon to give us his final remark, perhaps a statement about the vision for the future, the perhaps one or two key things that he'd like to see change to really open up the floodgates, and then we'll play out with that video. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. I think just a very simple concluding remark is that, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Microbes have been around for billions more years than we have been, and that's what nature does. Nature doesn't see a waste. Nature sees it as a resource or a feedstock into the next process. And that's the way that life happens. That's the circle of life. That's circular economy. Mankind, we've stuffed it up, but the opportunities are there to look at these implementations. And I think if we look at driving this to ensure that more and more people are informed of the opportunities of biogas and the way that it can have an economic impact, a social impact, and environmental impact, I'm hoping from COP26 we start to see some direction and stability in the carbon market, and I think that would also have a guiding role. But Gordon, fantastic to have you on the show. I'm a huge supporter, you know that. I've got another project that came up today I need to speak to you about soon. But thank you very much. A couple of words from you, and then we'll go on to the video. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. So from my point of view, one thing that we really are very excited about in biogas is the low threshold to entry. we can bring on just about anybody. If you are eager to get involved in the biogas industry, there's no need for fancy certificates and so on. Literally, we can use one of our diggers.
Right, we've just got a little bit of breakup there.
Excited about that, and we really just want to engage and start to generate hundreds and thousands of jobs around this industry. It's that open and it's ready for us. Let's go, guys.
Perfect.
What a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed to Gordon Ayres from AGAMA Energy and to Chris Whyte for your input as always. So ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our 3-part series on organic waste. Please join us next week, same time, 1 o'clock Wednesday next week, where we open up the conversation about e-waste. We're very excited to have our guest for next week, Malcolm Whitehouse from AST Recycling will join us. So be there or be square. Thank you very much indeed. Let's play out with the AGAMA video. Thanks very much indeed. Bye-bye, gentlemen.
Bye-bye.
SA-led is looking at low emissions development, and one of the projects they decided to look at is biogas digesters. And they found out about the school, which seems to be a working model for how you can put in place a biogas digester. If you look at how much waste is going into the biodigester, it works out to be about 6 tons per year. Now, 6 tons that would hopefully end up on the municipal waste dump site. Now it's going into the biodigester. It also means it's not lying on the dump site or over the fence. Now you've removed that. So there's a health benefit. I think it's a great project.
Kusho ukuthi ukuphuma kwami ngiyolanda iproject ngaya ku WECCF, iproject yabo mama. Sasinenkinga ye-energy. And then njenge electricity nama increment we electricity. And then kula sacala khona singabo mama sasukuma saphuma sahlangana kusho ukuthi ngezindawo ezahlukahlukene sazoba nale complaint leyo ukuthi i-energy esifunayo thina i-energy yemvelo. Sabona ukuthi kungcono akufakwe ama-solar panel and then kube i-biogas and then ngcono kube khona nama-veg azokwazi ukuthi a-maintain i-biogas ukuthi ihlale isebenza ibe ne-boost yokuthi yenze i-gas kukwazi ukuthi kuphekelwe abantwana esikolweni.
The school, it has been zoned as a disadvantaged school. It accommodates people from grade R to grade 7. And most of them are from Mkhanwa. Mkhanwa is a disadvantaged area next to the school. In most cases, they come here without any breakfast. At the moment, we are feeding 515 children on daily basis. And they are fed twice. There is a breakfast and lunch. The biogas digester is a wonderful tool to have in the school. Number one, we have been wasting a lot of money in the PLG gas. We were spending close to 5,000 rand per month. Since the inception of the biogas digester, we are able to spend half for now. The long-term projection is we should spend almost zero on cooking, and we should also spend zero in the budget of the department on buying the PLG gases. That is our long-term projection.
How I started in here before the biogas was installed is compared to now that the biogas is installed. Before then, it was very difficult because we have to come very early because the LP gas compared to the biogas stove is very slow. The kids, when they arrive, they must get some porridge before they go to the classes. As compared to now, I can come in here at school at 10 to 7 or quarter to 7, and then 5 past or 10 past 7, the porridge is ready. So there is a big difference, the time difference. So it's like fun now. We're having fun. I do collect the data from in the morning when we cook the porridge. I have to check how much do we have on the meter readings before I use the stove. So I have to write the first one and the second one. And then I can light the stove and use the stove to cook and measure the time. When I put the pot in there, I must check my time. What time is it? How much time did I use? And after that, I must also see how much gas did I use? How much gas is left? We're still going to continue to cook for the day.
We first came here about 3 years ago to have a look at the site with the client at that stage. The school was chosen very much because of the people that were here. There was a very strong, enthusiastic group, local people who had got together and wanted to do things for the community. They actually approached us and they had some strong ideas about what they wanted to do, so it was a very easy group for us to work with. Biogas is essentially a gas that is a natural thing that occurs due to anaerobic digestion. The gas that is generated out of that is a mixture of methane, CH4, and that, luckily for us, is a flammable fuel. It is probably about the best renewable energy option because what happens is that every time you have human beings in a group, you have waste. So waste in communities is a dangerous problem. We've got vermin that come around and run around in schools, and by using it very, very quickly, by keeping it out of the vermin's path, you end up with a solution, actually a three-pronged solution to a single social problem. The thing that needs to be said is the success of biogas in a school is that it cannot be a standalone product. It has got to be an embed unit that has a garden involved, it has water harvesting, it has education at its core, it has community support. That is the way to a successful biogas project. And it is important that we don't lose sight of that up here.
The biogas is from lab to a kitchen. When bafaka ukudla mhlambe if ama-veg abolile, then it helps to gain gas and then they can cook for us.